Hello, Brian. How are you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
Good. I am good, and I can see you are out in your yard, and it's very beautiful.
Yeah, it was nice today, so I decided to come outside today.
Yeah, I love it with nature. That's very good. Hello, viewers. Welcome to Talk to Phoebe podcast, where we explore leadership, innovation, AI, and the people transforming the future of work and human potential. I'm your host, Phoebe. Today, I'm honored to welcome Brian Curtis. Brian is an executive coach, business consultant, counselor, and the author of There is Only One Heart. His mission is simple but profound to help people and organizations reconnect with what truly drives sustainable success, emotional intelligence, compassion, and conscious creation. By blending emotional healing, neuroscience, leadership development, help leaders move from reaction to mastery, from burnout to purpose, and from disconnection to alignment. Brian, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Phoebe.
Right. Brian, your message begins with a powerful statement. Healing starts with the heart. What led you to that realization?
Well, just observing nature, everything has a heart and
Yes.
everything comes from and goes back to the heart, just like our own bodies. So the structure emulates the field that it's in. So if we look at anything, there's always this toroidal field. It makes a toroid, which is it's a shape. If you look at your own biofield or a galaxy or solar system, it all looks pretty much the same. And it always has a heart where everything comes from and goes back to when you look at the field. So the structures that we see, whether it's a plant, a tree, I like to use trees as an example because the seed, if you look at the heart of a tree where it's growing in both directions, that was the location of where the seed was at. And the seed, when you plant a seed, it grows roots first, and then it breaks out into the sunlight and it continues to grow in both directions, and both has to supplement the other. You can't have a huge upper structure without a huge root structure. And so everything's growing it kind of oscillates back and forth when it grows. The roots have to be able to support what's above it. So if it doesn't have a good root complex, then it'll just fall over. you know
Right.
So, our own, the way that we grow is the same way. We grow in the womb, and the heart, everything starts with the heart. And so you could say that, the womb is kind of like the soil, the thing that gives us nutrients until we're ready to break out on our own, and we break out into the light. And then you're always trying to, grow from wherever your roots are. So,
You spoke only openly about your own journey from breakdown to breakthrough. Can you share what that experience looked like?
breakdown to breakthrough.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
That journey
I
looked
guess, yeah, I mean, always trying to break down the basics of, what brings me joy or fulfillment. And, for a long time, and I've told this story quite a bit. I don't know how much of it I covered in my book, but, I've had a vacation house, but in the end, toys, you collect things to play with, but in the end, if you're not sharing that with people, then what's the point? I
yes.
mean, there's no shared experience. And so the only thing that you're really chasing is a shared experience.
Yes.
And if you can realize that, when you're just a part of the people around you, and so the objective for me, and when you just kind of break that down in your mind after years, the objective is to, in what way can I find a way to have a shared experience with as many people as possible that understand that concept? Because it's not fun when you're trying to share it with people who are just constantly focused on their toothbrush, or it doesn't matter what it is. If you're just focused on, these, external things that are just temporary.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, when did you realize that emotional healing wasn't just personal, but deeply connected to leadership and business success?
Well, I mean, the way we work together kind of emulates, I talk a lot about, I make posts about it. I've talked a lot about it in the past, but the traditional business model is basically how much revenue you can get. What can I create to get the most amount of money? And so you see most business models are kind of structured that way, where you have this hierarchy of getting money as you get closer to the top of the business model. And since it's externally biased like that, there's either you're buying into that, and so there's this competitive nature to be something that you're not really, you hear about it all the time. I don't know how many LinkedIn posts I've seen where people said that Yeah, I built 3 7-figure businesses or 8-figure businesses, and I just got lost in it and realized I was just causing myself a lot of stress because, you're in the business of managing people to make you
Yes.
money. It's
Yes.
not a healthy relationship in any way. So it kind of turns against the whole figuring out how to spend more time together. You don't, and so your time spent together at work becomes this toxic environment where you never spend together after work because nobody likes one another.
Mm.
They all hate each other. That's not always the case, but they end up falling into these culture groups, that kind of support each other inside those systems. And I witnessed that for 25 years. I
Wow.
worked in the public sector and the private sector, and
Wow.
it never changed. It didn't matter if there was any kind of hierarchy or pyramid scheme involved, it was always the same. And so my mission was always to kind of educate, that there are better ways that we can work together, that we can create together and treat each other equally, and in the end, we're all the same. We're all just creators and receivers.
Absolutely.
We're a point of awareness in a field.
I agree.
It's like, so when you point judgment at one another, it doesn't make sense.
At
It
all.
from a purely, physical science perspective, it's, how can you judge a tree for being a tree or an ant for being an ant? It really doesn't make sense.
Awesome. So, what would you say to someone who believes emotions should stay out of the workplace?
Well, I think that there's healthy emotion, that's grounded in unconditional love when you understand the things that I just talked about.
Yeah.
When it falls into positive and negative, that's when it's a push and pull energy. So, you see so many push and pull dynamics. If somebody's, trying to pull something from you or has a hidden agenda of any way, to try and, try to, get up the ladder or whatever, those things, you'll never get rid of emotion because emotion is the energy that moves thought forms. This reality is information and energy. And the
Yes.
information, the number of waves per second or time and energy,
Yeah.
Mother Earth. So there's always a carrier, and which is, kind of the feminine aspect, which is the energy that moves the masculine creative, side. So yeah, I would say that you're never going to get emotion out. Why would you want to get emotion? Because if there's no emotion, yeah, the emotion that you're trying to get to is unconditional love, and that's something that if that's something that you can sustain, then you don't have to go through these highs and lows of positive and negative emotion, where you run into those highs and lows when you get something that you want, but then you realize it's temporary, and then you go down, and then you go back up, and you go back, and riding that wave, it's just.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. So again, it seems that many of us have been taught to separate achievement from fulfillment. Well, you often said unresolved emotion quietly shape how we lead, love, and perform. How does that actually show up in organization?
Well, like I said, it's really rare to find an organization that is tempered. That's why we have so many coaches and consultants. All they're doing is trying to ground out all that negative emotional energy within those systems and it started with a negative external attachment. Somebody had it in their mind that success was externalized. And so they naturally attract other people that have the same concept. And so when you're running that you're constantly trying to feed that emotion where you're identifying with something external, you have to hire somebody to help you deal with it a lot of times, or just don't deal with it and just deal with the stress. And that's why there's such a high burnout rate in those organizations.
Okay, that's very good. So can someone truly become a great leader without first understanding themselves?
Well, no. And actually, to be perfectly honest, we're all leading ourselves.
Yes.
It's not really, I can't think it's anybody's job to lead someone else. All you can do is teach and say, hey, you make your decisions for yourself, and you want to make sure that you're defining yourself as everything. You're not this little thing. You're just a point of awareness in a field it's non-local.
Yeah.
We found out that space-time is non-local, which means you're everywhere and everything. That's why there's so many psychics now, especially on YouTube. That the psychic aspect of our human element has been really expanded. It's been publicly displayed now for quite some time through remote viewing, or a lot of they're saying, you can believe it or not believe in it, but the military uses it. So, it's a factual thing.
Yeah.
I know people personally that have worked as remote viewers for the military, because obviously if you're going into some place where it's a lot better to know where people are at before you go in there. And if you have somebody that has a psychic ability to remote view it, why wouldn't you use that? And every military on the planet uses remote viewers for that fact.
Okay,
So
that's great. Okay, so what happened when a leader, when leaders suppress emotion instead of processing it?
eventually you have to process it. You don't have any choice. You can suppress it for as long as you want. As long as you want, you can try. I mean, if you look at the group collective, there's a lot of suppressed emotions out there. The longer you suppress it, the more it flares up. Eventually, it'll blow up. But that's just part of nature. It's just like trying to contain a bomb. I mean, you can try to contain it as long as you want, but eventually it'll blow up on you.
Go up.
So yeah, I mean, the best thing is to experience those emotions, let them purge, and then in the post, after you've gone through that, you'll be able to. One thing, there'll be a big clearing, and you'll get a lot of information after that. Because you'll understand why that happened. When you clear out old emotional or old thought forms, then it allows new thought forms and new parts of yourself to be represented. So it's just part of a process. Growth happens forever, so it's just part of a process.
Awesome, that's very good. So what role does self-awareness play in becoming an authentic leader?
It's everything. If you're not self-aware, then you're not going to be able to help people where they can, show them where they can how to become more self-aware. And if you haven't gone through a process to become more self-aware, then you won't know how to at least explain to somebody how to become more self-aware. The teachings of Jesus and the Bible are some of the most powerful teachings out there. Some of it gets misrepresented and turned into religious things. There's 33,000 sects of Christianity, and they all believe something different. But if you take it the basic words of what he said and what he, don't focus on the external because it's temporary, find the kingdom of heaven within. Those simple things, if you search within and you start to understand yourself more, then you become more at peace with yourself and understand who and what you are. So ideally, that's what you want to, what brings peace to your life, not constantly trying to grab something out here. That'll never be peaceful. You'll always be under tension. So you have to think, okay, letting go is a very powerful act because it allows you to be peaceful in the moment and be non-reactive to the things that are going on around you. So
awesome. I agree with you. Your work doesn't stop at emotions. It also incorporates neuroscience. You combine emotional healing with neuroscience. How are those two worlds connected?
That's a good question. And it's something that I bring up that I don't hear a lot of in the public gateways. 'Cause people always talk about speaking their truth. But if your truth isn't grounded in reality, then a lot of times you can believe in something that takes you through an emotional roller coaster. Yes. And you kind of see that. You'll see people that are in an emotional roller coaster and they're constantly letting things go. But if you don't ground it in the fact that, like I already kind of covered, you're just a point of awareness in a field. You've got three parts, the source, we're all source, creating a structure in a field. If you can really break it down to that, the time element really doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter if you're making old decisions based on an old identity that you had a misalignment or a misunderstanding of who you are or what somebody else was, then that'll take you through an emotional roller coaster. And all of us grew up in environments that were emotional roller coasters because nobody really understood who and what they are. Yes. Because, the world that we look around and see, it's not telling you that. It's not telling you that you are source creating a structure in a field. But if you can ground yourself in that, just knowing that, then it really enables you to, how can you not love something for not knowing, for being blind to somebody? You don't hate somebody for being blind. It becomes much easier to unconditionally love people because we're never going to know it all. Yes. But if you just know that one thing, to not judge a blind man for being blind, yes. Why would you do that? You're right. You're not going to help by doing that. Okay, awesome. All you can do is open your own eyes and help people and do the same for other people.
Yeah. That's fine. So what role does subconscious mind play in our everyday decision?
Oh, it always does. Your subconscious mind is always working. And a lot of experts have realized that the unconscious mind kind of controls everything. Yes. Because, there's so many therapeutic techniques now where they'll put you under hypnotherapy and then give you a suggestion. And you can heal the body instantaneously by giving a suggestion, putting you in a hypnotic state, which means that there's something that's actively working in your body that you're not consciously aware of. When we measure the brain, it's only like it's average 10% of your brain is what you're using,
Mhm.
which means 90% of what you're creating is unconscious. The idea is to become more conscious of how you're creating yourself. And so, yeah, going down that path is part of the self-awareness journey for sure.
That's great. So many people operate from reaction rather than intention. How can they move towards conscious creation?
I think through that process, just learning to create and receive and being open to receive instead of demanding to be received. If I did something for somebody, for me to demand that they give me something in return has kind of a negative connotation. If you're living if everything is you and everything that you look around, then it doesn't matter what you give to, there has to be a return circuit, and it has to go and it has to be balanced.
Yes.
The field is always balanced. So it doesn't matter where you get it from, you're always going to get it.
Yes.
So if you think of it that way, it becomes much more peaceful, if you understand that, I don't have to receive something from you. All I have to do is give the part of myself that I'm really grounded with. And if it's of a healing nature, then that's what I'll receive in return.
That's very great. So can emotional intelligence actually be developed over time?
Definitely. That term has changed for a long time.
Yeah.
And, like bring it back to what we talked about earlier. Emotional intelligence is just your level of awareness and your ability to understand that you're living in this, because you've got projected thought forms and emotional states all around you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, they're moving through your biofield. So a lot of times you're experiencing things that aren't yours.
Yes.
So emotional intelligence, coaches and consultants use that word a lot of times, but they don't. It's really not expanded on to really understand how deep the rabbit hole goes with that. If you're living in this, if everything is projecting a thought form and emotional state and it's moving through you, the ability to discern what those are and how they're being sourced and what level of awareness they're being sourced from really, goes down a rabbit hole of how emotionally intelligent you are. There's that level goes as far as you want to take it, right? Your ability to listen, and then your ability to ground out those emotional states, so you're expanding the awareness around you.
Okay, that's great. So if individuals carry emotional pattern into the workplace, then organizations do it too. So the next question is, you help organizations reduce stress, unlock creativity. Why do healthier leaders create healthier businesses?
Well, because they understand themselves better.
Okay.
If you don't understand yourself very well, then you'll look at other people in the same light that you're just projecting your own self-identity. So it's always going to be healthier if you understand yourself better. You're always bringing people, because we're all subject to our environment. So, but we're also source. So if you can ground yourself in that fact, then you can elevate the consciousness of the people around you and increase the momentum. If you look at a picture of the field where everything's like a picture of a galaxy where it's growing brighter towards the center, the change of momentum is increasing. And at the same time, it's all moving more energy and information as it grows closer to the heart. So it's just expanding its own ability to move more information and energy and shine brighter.
What are leaders getting wrong about workplace culture today?
It's changing. It's constantly changing. Everything's changing. So, it's change isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
If everything stayed the same, life would get pretty boring. So, enjoy the change. They talk about workplace culture and you constantly fix it, but the only thing that you're really doing is trying to expand your awareness of who and what you are, and let that bleed into your environment and create healthier states of being in your mind and body and soul for you and the other people around.
That's awesome. So what does truly human-centered organization look like?
Human-centered.
What do they truly look like?
Yeah, I think we're always centered, whether we realize it or not. So, but we're always learning more about ourselves. So the way that we work together and the way that we interact together is changing over time. I don't know if you could ever say that it looks like one thing, because if it's created, it's temporary. Everything that's created will be destroyed. And on a long enough timeline, everything's forgotten. Mm-hmm. But you can enjoy the present and enjoy, what you're creating now with other people, and do your best to stay centered and just accept it for what it is and love it for what it is. And then it's a much happier way of being.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as business evolve, they're also facing another major transformation, artificial intelligence. We are living through one of the biggest technological shifts in the history. How do you see AI changing leadership?
I think AI is a tool, just like a wrench. When they built the first car, it had a huge impact. People didn't have to ride horses or carriages anymore, so it was a huge change. It was a lot of jobs changed. I mean, there was horse trainers that lost jobs. And it's no different than that. All it is it's a new tool that's allowing us to do something that we didn't have access to before in the past, and so there's an exponential change. Change goes through cycles. So we're going through a cycle of change that's people get uncomfortable with because things change really fast, but that's okay.
Okay, awesome. So could AI actually expose a lack of emotional and maturity inside the organization?
No, I would say AI has nothing to do with emotional maturity. I mean, AI has no intuition, and it's a language model. And I've actually experimented with it. I actually, I've given it sarcastic messages and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this for this," and then give it a sarcastic message, and it can't pick up on it. It has no idea. It can't hear the tone of my words. It can't hear, the emotion that I put behind something. And so it's actually not a very good tool for interacting between you and someone else. And I would recommend, if somebody's using AI for business, you can use it for a lot of automation and use it as it's a really good data gathering tool. It has a lot of good uses, but when it comes to becoming an intermediary between you and somebody else, it's terrible. You should never use it because it can't pick up the tone of somebody's response. So, everybody's at a different state at a different time. So if I used an AI model to respond to somebody who is trying to get a hold of me, more than likely it's going to give them a response that doesn't represent the tone of which, if they're asking for help or what kind of help they're asking for. Only us as people are the only ones that, can do that, unless AI evolves into some kind of, artificial amino acid life form that we create. Maybe it can start to respond to emotions in the field, but in its current state, not very good at it.
Okay, that's awesome. So can leaders embrace technology without losing genuine human connection?
Definitely. It's fun to work on a car together as long as you're prioritizing the fact that it's fun to work together on the car rather than prioritizing the value of the car itself, if that makes sense.
I think that's a good analogy. All right. So do you think the future of competitive advantage will be technology or humanity?
Well, our ability to work together directly affects the things that we're creating. The car that you're driving was a thought in someone's head before it was ever came into physical reality. If you understand that and you can bleed and you can present that to the people around you and let them become a part of the creative process, then what you're creating becomes much more powerful, especially when you encourage people to become creative and input into whatever it is that you're building, instead of having, trying to control what it is it's being built. And then, you want to empower people to joyfully create, and be a part of that.
Awesome. That's good. So at the center of your work is a framework called the Heal the Heart Method. Can you walk us through the Heal the Heart Method?
Heal the Heart Method. Well, our structures kind of mirror image the field that we're in. The heart has a pericardium. It's the watery sac around the heart. It's actually a protective barrier around the heart. So energetically, you have the same type of thing. And if you have a barrier around the heart, then it's limiting the information that's going in your biofield. So if you look at your biofield, this is your creative circuit. I'm speaking. So this is the words coming. I speak from the heart. Yes. It's the first energy center from the heart. My third eye chakra and up, and then the return circuit is the lower chakras, below the heart space. That's the return circuit, the receptive circuit of the body. So ideally, you want to remove the barriers from your heart, because if there's a barrier around your heart, then there's a boundary. There's a boundary for information. So healing the heart is the primary thing, and you'll experience pain, emotional pain, if there's a barrier around the heart. Because it doesn't feel good to either express yourself, or maybe it doesn't feel good to get something from somebody, or maybe what somebody's projecting at you makes you feel bad because you're looking at it through a skewed lens because there's a barrier around your heart. You don't see that person just doesn't understand that you're connected, and it makes you feel unconnected with your environment. So the method is just to let it go, and that becomes a very personalized thing for everybody. It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with someone's heart, that's who we are. So it's not an easy thing to talk about. Usually you have to walk somebody down a path in order to let go of the barrier around your heart is not easy. So
Okay, that's awesome. So what does it mean to integrate the heart and the mind?
it means that your mind is getting, more and more information from the heart. If there's a barrier around your heart, you're getting less information. There's a misconception in the spiritual community that things come from down above, but that's not true. If everything's sourced from here, then everything, all the information and energy is already there in the heart space. So it's coming from this direction. So the more that you feel connected at your heart space, the more that you'll start to understand yourself and the people around you in your mind. So that's really the heart-mind connection. And modern science is starting to understand that more and more. They're starting to understand that the heart is controlling the body much more than the brain is. Yeah. They've been trying to study that connection for a long time now, and they're starting to see there's more neural connections in the heart than there is in the mind. Yeah, for the body.
Yeah, that's very good. So how can people begin releasing emotional patterns they've carried for years?
Stop thinking that the way that you feel comes from out there. You're always creating the way that you feel. If you understand that in and of itself, then, it kind of forces you down a path where, okay, if I am in charge of my own emotional states, what do I need to do? What do I need to understand in order to get to where I want to be emotionally? If I'm in a negative emotional state, why can't I control it? Why can't I control the way I feel? And just asking yourselves those questions will lead you down a road to where, it's self-mastery. You want to master yourself and understand that the way someone else is feeling doesn't have to be the way you're feeling. That's really difficult, especially when you're showing up to maybe a workplace every day where everybody's unhappy every time they show up for work. Statistically, heart attacks are most common on Mondays, and they happen at the workplace. I actually witnessed this when I went to a job site, and I witnessed somebody have a heart attack Monday morning. Because Monday, traditionally, most people don't like going to work on Monday. They just got done off the weekend. Now they're looking at a whole week of work, and Monday morning is the most stressful time. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to work all week. So, and so if your heart is already in a bad place, that's the most common time to have a heart attack. Wow. Because you don't like going there. And so if you're in that negative, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then you're more susceptible to it. So you'll fall into those negative emotional states, and if everybody's in that state and everybody you're working around doesn't like it either, you absorb all that, so you're not consciously aware that you're creating it. Yes. You're just moving the same stuff that's around you. Yeah. And so you don't, the only way to really become, more conscious is a lot of times you have to pull yourself away from it because there's momentum. So you're trying to ground out the momentum of doing the same thing day after day after day.
Okay, awesome. That leads me to another question. What practical daily habit helps cultivate calm, grounded performance?
Calm, grounded performance.
Yes.
I think it's really good to get out in nature, go sit by a river, sound of water going by and the birds, and find a peaceful area. And then, understand that that's what you're a part of. Yes. And you're trying to bring that peace into any situation. You should be able to bring that. You shouldn't be afraid to go in front of anybody or be around anybody. If you can realize that the peace is always right there with you, then it doesn't matter what's around you. Yes.
That's great. Okay, you've captured many of these ideas in your book. Your book is titled "There is Only One Heart." That's a beautiful and intriguing statement. What does it mean?
That there's only one heart. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you look at. There's only one heart. It doesn't matter how far out you go or how far in you look. There's always one point that you're looking at where everything's coming from and going back to. And that's why space-time is non-local. I mean, I say that and a lot of times people don't understand what that means. But when you look at anything, there's only one heart of where you're always a part of that one heart, that one thing. Yeah. So, understanding that, it means that you can't separate yourself from anything. It's impossible.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's very good. So what message do you hope readers take away from the book?
Why unconditional love is the most powerful thing for that reason. Because if you really can't separate yourself from anything, then how can you not love it? Love is like gravity. If you look at gravity is a simple equation. It's just that the things have a tendency to move towards one another. It's not magnetic. It's not positive or negative. It's just a tendency of one thing moving towards another relative to how close it is to one another. And I think gravity in nature is the perfect representation of what unconditional love is, because it doesn't matter how big it is or how small it is or what it looks like or what it doesn't look like. It still wants to move towards one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, why do you believe we've created a false divide between achievement and fulfillment?
I think fulfillment and achievement are, what are you achieving? Your self. I think you'll be much more fulfilled if you can learn to find out that all your fulfillment is held within yourself. That you stop looking out there for something. That if you can understand how to create your own peace within, then you're never looking at some kind of external achievement, like being the best golfer, or being the best tennis player. Those things can be kind of, something temporary that is a temporary achievement that ultimately doesn't bring any fulfillment because it's temporary. So if you can find something and understand how that something to become something permanent, that's really the only kind of source of fulfillment I think that you can achieve.
Yeah. So if someone is feeling lost, burnout, or disconnected today, where should they begin?
Take a nap, go to sleep, take a rest, find some time to take a break. I found that if you rest long enough, then you'll get to a place where you'll be so restless you'll got to do something.
Yeah.
Don't force yourself to do something out of a point of stress. Make sure that you're rested to a point where you just can't rest anymore, and then you'll realize, for one thing, if you stop eating for a day, if you just lay in bed for as long as you can, when you get up, you'll be productive. I guarantee you. It's just that our society has created all these points of stress, and so a lot of times and then we put ourselves under more stress on the weekend because you just want to have fun, but then you're putting your body through stress, and then that's that slow stress cycle that really makes you age. The body needs, we don't understand how much rest we need until we actually get it. Yeah.
So let's zero in on your practice. So what is working well for you right now? What has been frustrating?
My work right now is basically spreading this message, because, if you can teach people how to take care of themselves, then we're all much funner to be around.
Yes.
If I'm not taking care of myself, then I'm not very fun to be around. I'm going to be grouchy. I'm going to be hungry or sore. You prioritize taking care of yourself first. And then, because then your ability to help somebody else, teach them how to take care of themselves instead of trying to take care of everybody else. If you're always trying to take care of somebody else and you're not taking care of yourself, then yeah.
Awesome. That's very good. So let's go to the next question. Brian, after everything you've experienced and everything you've learned through helping others heal, what do you believe is the true purpose of leadership?
Leadership is, I think the true purpose of leadership is teaching that everyone is creating their own reality, and what, how deep does the rabbit hole go? If you're always looking outside of yourself and looking for somebody else to lead you, then you're not aware that all the information is coming from right here,
yes,
right in your heart. So, if you can't figure out how to unlock what information that you need within yourself, then trying to find it from somebody else ain't going to help you. You'll be looking for the rest of your life trying to find information out there and never understand that it was always within you the whole time. So I think that's ultimately that we're all leading ourselves, and we'll never be able to work together and create together until people understand that.
Okay, that's great. So what kind of world could we create if more organization puts heart back at the center of business?
I think business is changing.
Yes.
I think we're constantly seeing it change. So we'll just witness the process. It's always, the organism has always become more self-aware of itself, and we're always becoming something new. We're always growing into something new. Dinosaurs didn't last forever. They became birds, but there was a jump in evolution. So I always love that statement. It's somewhere in the Bible, we know not what we shall be. So I don't know, maybe I always joke about it with people I talk to. Maybe next time I'll be a grapefruit. I don't know.
Okay. If you could leave every leader, entrepreneur, or human being with one truth about the heart before you leave this earth, what would that be?
That everything has a heart. You can't get rid of it. And it's the source of everything. So, prioritize, trying to make sure that your heart is connecting with somebody else's heart, and don't worry about the ups and the downs because it's just temporary. The only thing that's constant is that unconditional love in the background because none of us all want to live isolated in little boxes, so eventually, I think that we're coming closer to a time when a big group of people will move together and start creating what they want together. And then it will continue to expand. And I think that's, just the next generation of what's going to happen.
All right. Brian, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom, your vulnerability, and your vision for the more human-centered future. One of the biggest lessons from our conversation today is that success and healing are not competing goals. In fact, they may be inseparable. As AI transforms our workplace and technology accelerates pace of work, perhaps our greatest opportunity isn't simply becoming smarter. It's becoming more connected, more aware, more compassionate, and more fully of ourselves. So to everyone listening, I want to say this is where we draw the curtain, and I wish you share this video with anybody that needs to hear it, because I tell you, a lot of people are in this position that they need to hear this message. And of course, at the end of the day, I'm going to put Brian's contact in our description box. We will post it in our channel so that you feel free to get into contact with him if you need his services or if you just want to know more. And I believe Brian will be pleased and ready to answer your questions. To everyone listening, until next time, let live with purpose, grow with intention, and never forget that real transformation begins from within.
Thank you, Phoebe.